Let's go to the demo, folks. This is Kade Bolger out of Canada, and he's going to be doing a demonstration for us this evening. We don't have any real solid rules on demonstration. We have some guidelines, and it's not his guidelines, it's your guidelines. And your guidelines are simply this: Kade is doing the demonstration. If you have questions or you need more details or whatever, you can ask. We'd prefer you not to say, I'll do that, but when we get done with the demonstration, if you've got a but, let's throw it in there. But first, I want to see how he makes these things, because I got grandkids and great grandkids, and I think they're going to want some of these things. Kade, it's yours, sir. We're going to mute everybody. And then I have to, all right, we're going to mute everybody. Then you read it.
Here we are. Perfect. Thanks for having me. Hi everyone. Hope all is well. So today I'm going to demonstrate for you a Turmkreisel. That's the German term for it. It's also known as a tower top in English, I guess, or that's what I call it. So that's what we're going to turn today. I'll go through, I'll touch a little bit on safety, preparing our materials, and then all the tools and techniques I use in turning this project. So it should be fun. So I'll go to this camera first, and I'll show you the project at hand. So this is the tower and the spinning top. So the one on right here, the base is roasted ash, red oak, with a cherry top and a walnut handle to spin your top. Okay. Oh, someone, yep, okay. And then this one here is made out of olive ash, and the top is black walnut and purple heart. So I'll just spin these and show you what they're gonna do, and then we can make one. So here I'll turn the back one first. There we are. And then they just fall and they catch themselves. So they're a fun little project. They can be addictive, and you'll just play with them over and over again. But there's some vital measurements that you have to keep in mind. So at the end, I'll tell you what can go wrong and how to troubleshoot those. Okay. There we are. All right. What's the difference between olive ash and regular ash? Regular ash is quite plain and just a blonde colored wood like this side. Olive ash has a lot of nicer browner characteristics and curl and swirl within the grain patterning that gives you the color contrast between the grain. So here you could see what olive ash would look like. And then on the other side, this is what plain ash would look like. Just pretty plain Jane blonde with no brown lines or black streaking through the wood. Okay, so that's the difference between olive ash and ash. Now you can make them all out of one, or you can make them with a separate base. I like making them with a separate base because it makes them a little more bottom heavy. If you do it this way, you have to remove a lot of the wood in the top, so it's not top heavy. For when this falls over, the whole piece will fall over. Okay? So let's get started. So I'm going to turn one in 4 pieces. So I'll touch on safety quickly. Wouldn't be a demo without a little bit of a safety disclaimer. Bare minimum, wear safety glasses. I wear earplugs to protect my ears. I like my hearing. Earplugs, custom pair, significantly less expensive than one hearing aid. So protect your hearing. You'll save a lot of money in the end. Woodturners often go deaf from the chatter of the tool cutting the wood. I'm not wearing any rings, watches, bracelets. Anything that can pull me into the lathe could be detrimental to your fingers, small bones in your hands and your arms. I also do recommend wearing a full face shield. You may not think you're pretty, but your spouse does. Wear something that protects your face, okay? But we're not keeping our face in that line of fire to take a cannonball in the head anyway, okay? So always keep your head off to one side or the other. You can wear long sleeves. If you do, I recommend a cuff. I prefer short sleeves, less material close to my hands that are working on the lathe, less things that can potentially get pulled into the lathe. And now last but not least, I don't recommend wearing sandals, because if this piece fell off my lathe or this piece, my lathe sits 3.5 feet off the floor. And if that were to fall off the bedway, it could do some damage to the small bones in your feet. I'm just going to start my timer to keep me on time. And, but more importantly, if you're one of those wood turners that rest your tools on your bedway, they can shake, rattle, and roll and fall off the lathe, and they always land sharp point down. Now that skew could do some damage to the soft flesh and the tiny bones in your feet. So I recommend at least closed-toed shoes, anything over 10-pound steel-toe shoes, okay? That's it about safety. Now we're all responsible for our own safety, so take the proper precautions you see fit to protect yourself, stay fit, stay safe, have fun, and enjoy the journey. So I'll talk a bit about preparing our materials. No, I wasn't watching you yesterday. I was busy working. If that question was for me. And let me see. So preparing our materials. I'll switch to this camera. I don't watch too much YouTube. So here we go. Here's my materials. So the tower of our top is out of ash. It can be any length you desire. I start with a 2x2 square, whatever length you desire. In this case, it's 6 inches. This one was more like 4 inches, but you can modify this to whatever size you desire, okay? The base of the piece is roasted ash, and this is 3x3 by 1 1/8 inch thick, and that will be the base of the material, and that will sit just like that. Now the top portion, this is the top portion, and the top portion is turned out of a 2x2 square. In this case, it's 2.5 inches length. You can make it shorter, wider, longer. You can modify the design how you see fit, but depending on the size of the hole here, there are some measurements that are crucial to make sure it fits on the tower, but also spins properly and catches on the side when it falls down. So we'll talk about that later, okay? And the stem can be made out of whatever material you desire. In this case, It's a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch. This is 5 inches long, and this is Purple Heart. And I will get 2 stems out of this one piece. So let's get started. We'll rough these round, we'll mount them on the lathe, and we'll make some wood chips. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rough these round and put tenons on them. Now this is perfectly square, so I'm not going to rough this round. It will go right in my spigot jaws the way it is, and it will be turned like that. Now these are both perfectly square as well, and they can also go directly in my chuck, or you could turn them around, create a cylinder with a tenon that would fit in the chuck that you are using. Now you have to make a tenon the proper size for the chuck that you're using. So these I will use straight square. The only one I need to rough round is this one and stick it in a chuck. Actually, I need to set up my camera again because I had it lower to show the piece as it spun. So I'm just going to go to my tailstock camera, and I'm going to bring this back up to right there. Okay. Lock this all in place. Okay. I have camera 1, 2, 3, 4, and I will be wearing my safety glasses today. My actual mic broke on me, so I'm using my overhead mic, and I tried it with my face shield and it was quite muffled, so I am wearing safety glasses today. But my head is never in that line of fire. But again, we're all responsible for our own safety, so take the precautions you see fit to protect yourself. All right. So I'll do the base first. You can do them in many different ways. You can do the tower first, the base first. There's many ways to skin a cat. This is just the way I do it. I tend to work from the base up. So I do the base, the tower, the top, and then the base, the tower, the top, and then I do the handle to spin your top. Okay. All right, enough talking. Let's make some chips. Now I'm going to be turning today at 1800 RPMs. I always say turn at a speed that you feel comfortable turning at. You might not feel comfortable turning at a speed I turn at or Jimmy Clues turns at, so turn at a speed that you feel comfortable at. Stay within your comfort zone. Always give the piece of wood a spin. Make sure it's not going to hit your tool rest and become airborne. Get my little whiteboard here. Well, actually, let's move this back a little bit. We are. Now we can see a little better with the white background. Tighten your quill lock. It won't loosen with any vibration. And I'm going to start with a spindle roughing gouge. Okay. My tool rest is below center, and I am cutting at center. So I'm going to start off with just making this a round cylinder. Always anchor the tool before you engage the wood, otherwise it'll hit the wood, slam the tool rest, and you might have to change your underwear, okay? So anchor, line up the bevel, initiate the cut. Check it's round, we're round. I don't suggest using your fingers because they could get jammed or cut. If it is still slightly square. Now I am making a tenon that is going to be held in my chuck. I'm using a one-way stronghold chuck. So my perfect tenon is anywhere between 1 7/8 and 2 1/4 inches. Now it's okay to move your tool rest. I just recommend shutting your lathe off first. Production turners rarely slow their lathe down and they move the tool rest while the lathe is running, but they have a lot of experience doing so. So I recommend, depending on your experience level or the piece you're turning, always shut the lathe off to move your tool rest. You'll run into less surprises and less potential accidents. There we are. Now, when you make a tenon, you want this shoulder here to be flat because that references the jaws of your chuck. And that will reference, this will be spinning as true as it is between centers. Your tenon needs to be the proper size for the chuck you're using. I'm using a one-way stronghold chuck. So my perfect tenon size, right there, I'm at 2 1/8. So I'm bang on. What you want to have is full surface compression, full maximum surface area of the tenon in contact with those jaws. That will be your strongest hold possible, okay? If your tenon is too small, you're only going to be contacted in the bottom of these gullets. It's a weak hold. If your tenon is too large, you're only going to be in contact on these corners. A weak hold. So your strongest hold is a perfect circle within the size of the chuck you're using because you're going to have equal and adequate compression, giving you the strongest hold possible. Now the distance, here I have 3/8 of an inch, which is perfect. The maximum size tenon you want is 3/8 of an inch because that gives you 1/8 of an inch air gap in between the wood and the chuck body. You want that air gap. You don't want the wood bottomed out on the bottom of that chuck, because if I get a catch on this opposing corner and it's bottomed out in that chuck, it has leverage to pop out of the chuck and fly through the air. So by having that 1/8 of an inch air gap, it acts as an airbag, absorbing that shock, and 9 times out of 10 staying in your chuck, as long as you tightened it properly. Okay? Now I'll switch this around. And that's what you want. You want a good bite by the spur drive to hold that piece there, because that's going to drive this safely and efficiently. But more importantly, keep it on the lathe. Just a couple little taps. You don't need to reef on it because you don't want to put too much stress on those bearings. Hold on to it because you don't want it hitting your bedway or any of the metal parts, opening it up for rust. But what you can get is a nice shiny stainless steel bedway which won't rust, even when you turn wet wood or ding it. I hold this stationary and I turn the back wheel. I don't hold the back wheel and turn the chuck because it could be off slightly and it can ruin the threads of your spindle or your chuck adapter. Chuck key. If that chuck key is in that chuck, my hand never leaves that chuck key. You don't want to forget it there. Come back, start the lathe, and have an anti-tank round flying through the air. So my rule is, if it's in there, my hand never leaves the chuck key.
Right. Bad juju.
And also, if you were to do that, it can actually come around, hit your tool rest. That will damage your tool rest, break your tool rest, damage your banjo, damage your chuck, damage your threads and your spindle. It'll send those belts squealing across that wheel. So it will be an expensive fix and an expensive mistake. Okay? That's
Or you
if it
could-
doesn't come airborne and hit you like a mortar.
Or you could break the gear tines in your chuck and make your chuck basically unusable. Ask me how I know that sometime.
Yeah, you could do that too, yep. So I
Imagine
always
if I read
tighten
about
this,
that
I
stuff.
always tighten both holes. Make sure it's tight and one side's not looser than the other. I figure the manufacturer put the two holes there for a reason. Why not use it? Now the first thing I do is I come and I face this surface so I have a flat surface. You can do that with a spindle gouge, you can do it with a skew, you can do it with a bowl gouge. Which tool should I use? All right, bowl gouge. It is. Tool rest below center. I'm cutting at center. And I'm just going to face that surface. Flute is at a 45 in the direction I'm cutting. Slow down as you approach center because it's the slowest spinning part of that wood. I'm going to join these with a mortise and tenon. So I drill with the same drill bit I'm going to use for the top of the tower. Okay. Now this is a 7/8. I believe it's 7/8 drill bit. I'll just double check here. Yeah, 7/8 drill bit. And I'm doing a mortise, which will take the tenon from my tower. Now I need to slow down to a drilling speed. You want to drill through the wood. You do not want to burn through the wood. Okay. When I take this drill bit out of the wood, I shouldn't be able to fry an egg on it. I should be able to grab it and hold it still. Okay. If it is burning hot, either the speed of the lathe is too high or your feed rate is too slow or too fast into that wood. Okay. Drill down about 1/8 of an inch. See, I'm not burning my hand. I'm not holding it away. I can't fry an egg on that. So I drilled at a slow enough speed with the proper feed rate. It will keep your drill bits sharp and your wood less likely from heat cracking. All right. Now, the base of my tower, you can make whatever diameter you like. The only thing is, you need to keep in mind how it will sit on your base. So if it's 2 inch, we don't have really much contrast between the base. How about 1 3/4 inches? That looks much better. So I will take a pencil and I will mark that roughly around 1 3/4 inches. You can double check with your calipers if you like, and I'm bang on. Now I need to shape my base. Now you can make it as fancy or as simple as you like. Artistic things I do, very complex and curvy and nice. Production, quick sellers, less expensive items I make fairly simple because they're faster to make. You get a quicker turnaround, less time in the piece. You can make more of an hourly rate in production turning. So this will have a simple taper. Actually, yeah, we might do a bead too. We'll see how I feel. Now I'm going to use a spindle gouge today. I often use a skew, so we'll switch it up and I'll use a spindle gouge. Now a spindle gouge or a detail spindle gouge, they're all the same thing. It really just varies in the grind, and they're all used for spindle turning. Spindle gouges and detail gouge have a shallower flute than a bowl gouge and normally a steeper bevel. But again, it's wood turner's preference. So if yours is different, that's cool too. Now I am cutting at center, and I would roll a bead here with the flute open, and I come around that corner just like so. Show that on this camera. I start here and I just roll over to create my bead. And I'm pretty close to that pencil line. I will have just one more pass. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could do a bead in the center, and why not? So first, I want to get this design to my line, and there I am. Next, I can create a bead here. With a skew, you would enter with the toe. But you can also make your entry cut with the tip of your detail gouge, just like so, by entering and lifting the handle. I will do a bead that will converge in the center of that line. Okay. Come around here, close your flute, around here, and close your flute, so you do not kiss and ruin the opposing bead. Okay? And you can do many different design elements with that technique. Now, it doesn't need to be quick. It can be slow and controlled. And these are all slicing cuts because I don't want to sand for hours. Okay? Over time, the natural progression is you want to sand less. In the beginning, you will sand much more, but over time, you want to sand less. Okay? So with good slicing tool control and technique, you have very little sanding. So however long that piece takes to turn, you shouldn't sand longer than that takes. So here I'm starting with 240 and I'm finishing with 240. I would be wearing a respirator and I would have my dust collection on. Always remove your tool rest And watch out where your hands are relative to that spinning chuck. And that's all the sanding I need because they were all slicing cuts and not scraping cuts. Okay. And there we have, here I'll show it on this camera. And there we have our nice roasted ash base. Oh, there we are. Now you can also burnish that if you want to make it shine a little bit more. Take some wood chips off the floor. And we just press those up against the wood. It will burnish it, it will polish it. But watch out for the chuck relative to where your hand is. Okay? You can also do that with heat by using the back fabric side of your sandpaper. Okay? And there we're done the base. Now I need to remove the bottom. Now there's a couple different ways you can remove the bottom. You could take it to your belt sander if you want to sand it away, create a whole lot of dust that you may inhale, or dust around your shop. Since we're wood turning, I'm going to wood turn it off. I find you get a better finish turning it off than sanding it off. Less occupational hazard with all that dust in the air as well. Okay. And it's a good skill builder to be able to do this and practice it. Quarter of a turn to make sure that's centered. Now we saw that little hole in the center. That's my centering pin for this jig, which is for a pressure chuck. I have a rough curve of the piece that follows the piece that I'm turning here. Okay. And then I need to remove my tenon. So I use the pressure of the tailstock to do so. Now this is all spindle orientation, so this is end grain. This is ash, it's roasted ash, so you could use a vacuum chuck, but depending on the pressure and how thin you go, the air will actually go through those open pores. You could use a glue block, you could use a jam block. This is the method I use. Now, you need some sort of padding in between the two pieces of wood, just in case it slips and spins. We don't want to burn a mark in this wood, or if I'm using a light colored wood, I don't want to burn a mark in this wood. So I use a little bit of padding. We can see this center hole is my recentering guideline. There we are. Tighten that until it's tight against the wood. It's not going to spin with the wood. That's enough pressure. Okay. Now I need to remove my tenon. So you could do that with a skew, a parting tool, a spindle gouge, or a bowl gouge. I'm going to do it with a combination of the bowl gouge and my modified bowl gouge. Double check, make sure it's running true. My finger is not flopping all over the place, so I know it's riding true. Now I just need to cut this away. Now I need to face the surface to a finished surface. So I start at that outer edge. And across, riding that double. making it slightly concave. So it fits on that outer edge. It sits on that outer edge. It's not going to be a wobbly base. It's going to sit flat on a table or a flat surface. Now it can be slightly concave if you like, but we want to have that ruler with a flat surface. Okay. I have a little bit of a hill right here. So one more pass. Now I am concave. Now I am going to reduce that to a small triangle. So here we can see where my tenon was. I'm going to remove that to a small triangle to where I feel comfortable. The thinness I feel comfortable. So if you only feel comfortable going to that, take it off, break it off, sand it off, cut it off with a saw. Less chance of it flying through the air. I feel comfortable going slimmer, so I'm going to go to a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. So now I switch to my modified bowl gouge, which is sharpened straight across the top, same bevel as my Irish grind bowl gouge. It is just flat across the top rather than having a curved wing. Okay. Grab the bevel, a little bit more here. There we are. Now before I go too thin, I would sand. I'll take my 240. I'll sand that surface. Now in hobby turning, if speed is not an issue, I would slow down between 300 and 400, and I would sand between that. Production turning, you often rarely slow your lathe down, but you get a good finish off the tool. So you have far less sanding. That's all the sanding I need. Okay? And look at that nice surface. Nicely cut, sliced, rarely sanded. Beautiful surface, finished surface off the tool with minimal sanding. Now I'm going to go through, not quite through, but I'm going to reduce that to a 1/16. Here. I'll take my thin curve parting tool. Let's set away a little bit more. There. And it came off slightly, but that's okay. It's still good. There. We have our base here. Let me see. It's a little too thin, but that's okay. We have a small piece here that we're going to sand off. So why sand it off when you can use the power of the lathe? Here. So we can sand this off with our sanding disc. Watch out for your fingers. And there we are. Sanded that nice. And if you really want to, you can hand sand it, but it's the bottom. And really nobody is going to know but your wood turning buddies. People at the craft shows and festivals and art shows, they're not really going to check your bottom. There we have our finished bottom. All right, now we're going to do the tower portion. So since I have a piece that is perfectly square, I can set this in my chuck jaws here, just like so. Bring that up to my centering point. Tighten my chuck. One more. There we are. First thing I do is I turn this round. My tool rest is set to cut this perfectly from end to end. I have it stop before the jaws, so there's no chance of me hitting those jaws as I approach those jaws. Okay. I'll rough this round quick. And that is why a roughing gouge has a square corner on one edge. You can go from square to round without worrying about getting too close to that chuck. Now we're round. Just going to move this slightly. There we are. There. Now we can see me drill. I grab my 7/8 drill bit again. I can switch to this camera actually. Do I roast my own ash? No, I buy it. I buy it already roasted. It's roasted in a kiln for an extra 2 days. So the roasting actually goes through the full piece. There was a discussion about this at one of our meetings, and people brainstormed and talked about roasting their wood in a smoker or a barbecue. But you want to roast the wood. You don't want the wood to ignite or combust. So you have to be really careful about that. And with the excessive heat of a smoker or a barbecue, it's more likely to roast and singe and burn on the outer edge before it ever roasts through to the inside. So rather than mess around and waste my time roasting it and the learning curve of actually doing it properly and efficiently, I would rather just buy it. They got it down to a science, and it's no more expensive than regular ash. Okay? Any other questions? No. Okay. There we go. Just double check the chat for a sec and I don't see many. So now I'm going to drill this. So I slow it down again between 200 and 300 RPM. Oh, what if I have a wobbly surface here? We can see it's slightly wobbly. The first thing I want to do before I touch that drill bit to that wood is I want to face that surface. So I have the drill bit drilling on a flat surface and it doesn't jump around when I make contact to that surface. Okay? So the last one I did with the bowl gouge, this one I'll do with the skew. I'm using my toe rather than my heel. Okay? And I'm riding that surface right down that vertical wall. Now I have a flat surface that that drill bit can touch up against. I'll show it again here. There. Now that vertical cut will probably be one of the hardest cuts with the skew. You have to make sure you stay within that sweet spot. You don't want to contact that hole bevel because it will wake you up very quickly. Hold on to your Jacob's chuck. And I am entering about an eighth of an inch or so. I'll double check with my caliper. And I'm right at an eighth. You can also go 3/16. Anywhere between an eighth and 3/16. But it also depends on when you create your stem or the spinner part of the spinning top. There we are. And that's deep enough. Pull your Jacob's chuck out. Always have that hand on that Jacob's chuck, especially when drilling deep. Friction, the wood can expand. Grab your drill bit. And if it grabs your drill bit when you're out feeding it, it can actually come out of the quill and be an anti-tank round flipping around in the wood until the wood breaks, and then it will launch that piece of metal with a sharp drill bit through the air. Bring up my live center. I just want to double check that, make sure I have no fuzz in there and I have a flat surface. Very light 30-second sand is all you need. Bring that up in contact. Now we're ready to shape the rest of our tower. Okay. Now you can rough a lot of this with your roughing gouge. First thing I rough is the top of the tower. This portion, okay? And it is 1.25 inches, roughly. Okay? So take my ruler, I just eyeball it. An inch is close enough. Okay? The 1.25 inches is because of the length as I came around that corner to make a half bead of the bottom of that tower. When I measured it at 1 inch. Okay? It's not really crucial, but what you need to keep in mind is when this falls, you want to have that to be able to catch on that side of the top of the tower. Okay? That is why it is 1 inch long. I can do some rough shaping with my roughing gouge. And I will do the fine shaping with a spindle gouge or a steel. Make my stop here. Now the wall thickness, you can vary. It can be 1/8, can be a 1/16. I like doing them closer to a 1/16 because it's the perfect ledge to catch the top. Okay. Next thing I do is I move this over slightly. I'm going to start to taper. Good enough for now. Now I will switch to my spindle gouge and I will refine my rough shape. Okay. First thing is my half bead here. Okay. Continue my taper. You can make that as thin or as thick as you like. You could also do those cuts with your bowl gouge. Yeah, here's my bowl gouge. Goes your flute when you hit that wall. And here, that's good. And create my hole here for my parting through. right. Round this over slightly, very slight. We'll do one more pass with my spindle gouge here. Need to adjust my foot in there. And you can rise the double all the way to the top. My roughing cuts are an 1/8 or more. Finishing cuts are a 1/16 or less. Got my sandpaper, a light sand.
Slow it down at all.
Watch out for that sharp edge. It is going to be very sharp. You do not want to touch it with your skin or your finger to see how sharp that corner is, because we can see here it is that sharp. Okay. We want to soften that slightly. There. That's good for sanding. And there we have the tower of our top out of ash. This we want to be undercut slightly. But we need to make a tenon that fits the mortise that we drilled into our base. So this hole is 7/8. I need to make that tenon 7/8. So I have my calipers here already prepared to a 7/8 distance. I hold these at the back of the lathe as I part through, and these will fall over once I am at the thickness I desire. Now you need to make sure that you round these corners if you are going to try this and contact both points to the wood. You don't want sharp corners because it will grab the piece and throw this at you, okay? Holding the tool one-handed, holding this back here, right there. I'm at my distance for that mortise, okay? I want to undercut this slightly. So I know it is going to sit flat on our base. The Forstner bit size was 7/8. So I drilled 7/8 here, roughly 1/8 of an inch depth. Okay? My calipers were set to a 7/8, and I parted in to create a tenon of 7/8. Now I need to eyeball to make sure that that is going to be roughly 1/8 of an inch. They go as thin as you feel comfortable. I'll soften this edge again. Got my thin kerf parting tool. That's good enough. Now my grain is running this way, so I want to break it with the grain so it severs above the surface, but it doesn't really matter because it's going in a base. Okay? So there we have our mortise and tenon, and there we have our union. Okay? Nice, crisp, clean connection. Okay? Now that will be attached with glue. Okay? So I take some thick super glue, and I'm going to put a bead along that end grain and some within that recess, just like so. Okay. Put this on, line up the grain. There we are. Good. And now I have a very high-tech clamp right here. Get them at the dollar store. Whoop. Here, bring this up, center, center, okay? And since the glue is in the base, I would stand this up like this to dry, and all the glue will seep into that mortise and tenon, and this will be solid by the time I'm done the top. Okay? We'll set that aside. Yes, it was a 7/8 Forstner bit, and I drilled in 1/8 of an inch into the mortise. So the tenon is 7/8 diameter and 1/8 of an inch long, or just shy of 1/8 of an inch. Any other questions I missed in the chat? All right, now the top.
Good for coverage. Thank you.
Perfect. The top is 2 by 2 square, 2.5 inch length. And I stick this in my chuck. You could turn it between centers, turn a tenon, but since it's perfectly square, I can fit it right in my chuck just like I did before. If I were doing it between centers and I created a tenon, it would be a 2 1/8 length, and my tenon would be 1/8 of an inch, leaving me with 2-inch stock, 2 inch by 2 inch. In this case, it's 2.5 inch, so I'm in the chuck a 1/2 inch, 2 inch protruding, 2 inch by 2 inch square. Here. You can use tailstock support, but you don't necessarily need it. So I'm not going to use it. Because I'm using this base and it's so far over, I would have to have my quill so far out. And by having it so far out with the vibration, it can loosen your quill and the components in your tailstock by having such an overhang. So I'd rather not have that overhang with the vibration because I need to face this and just turn this round. As it is in the chuck right now, for the size it's totally safe and doable. If you feel more comfortable with tailstock support, you wouldn't have this in the way. You could be right up close with tailstock support. Okay, we're round. Now I need to face this surface. So you can do that a couple ways. Since I have to just take out that hole first, I can do it with the parting tool. Okay. Now I need to create the bottom of my top. So this portion of the top. Okay. Now when I make this, it is the width of my parting tool. So I enter the width of my parting tool. And I go down to about half an inch. Okay. I then take that half, I split that in half, and with my spindle gouge, I create a taper. There we are. And there is the top spinning portion of my top. Now I can come across this surface with either your skew, your bowl gouge, or your spindle gouge. But the only part that really needs to be faced is this part. But actually, I skipped a step. I need to take my parting tool and I go in on a diagonal. And I create that shoulder. That shoulder is what is going to catch. This shoulder is what is going to catch on the top of the tower when it flops over from spinning. Okay? Now, how am I going to hollow that? You can use a scraper, you could use a spindle gouge. If you use a spindle gouge, don't go straight in with a flute like that because it's a serious catch waiting to happen. You want to go in on an angle, come back and around and exit the end grain because we always want to cut downhill. So all the cuts I did on the spindle were always from the high side to the low side. So I cut downhill. Now I'm going into the end grain. So if I cut in this manner, I'm cutting uphill into the end grain. So I need to cut from center out to the outer portion of that rim. I have this angled and I'm coming in. You see those shavings we're getting? We're cutting to the rim. Okay? And then again. You need to see, grab a light. Tone that down a little bit there. Do the side here. Now the walls need to be fairly thin. You don't want too top heavy of a top because it will fall out of your tower. Now you can also grab your round nose scraper If you use a round nose scraper, tool rest is above center. But I can't get right in there because I will be presenting the whole tool flat in that end grain. I want to come at an angle and come out that end grain to the sidewall to create my wall thickness. But I'm only doing from the center to the wall. Oh, shoot. That just broke off on me. That's okay. I got more prepared.
Boy, that happened just as Billy Burt left, because he wouldn't let you forget it.
I know. That's all right. What can go wrong? I haven't made too many of these, and I usually don't have those issues. I guess maybe rushing a bit to stay on good time, but that's okay. We can still get this done.
It only
Anything
happens
can
on
go
video.
wrong at any time, especially if you're demoing, right?
It happens.
Members, if you're just joining us, we did a complete narrative on what's happening right now a few moments ago. We're recovering from a break. And Dan, Kate is just going to turn and turn and turn and catch up. So hold off, okay?
There. I come in with my parting tool again, diagonal. Move that little lip. Move my wall. So now just blend the bottom there. There. That's all I need. If you can do it right with this the first time, you don't necessarily need a scraper. Now I would sand that very lightly. And I don't stick my fingers in this crevice because if I get bound between the two woods, it's going to twist and torque. So I just go in there. I don't try and get in behind that shelf. Just soften those sharp corners. I don't want to modify the point. I just want to sand this and round those corners so they're not sharp. That's all the sanding I need for that. Over here. Yep. Now I need to shape the outside to match the inside. I can start with thin curve parting tool, just make a visual reference. There we are. And I can use either my spindle gouge coming around that corner. Light cuts here because we don't want to go through the wall. Up and around that corner. There we are. And you could also do that with your skew, which will give me a better finish. My 240, lightly sand that. Soften that sharp edge. All the sanding we need. Now, here's a good tip of the day, hack of the day. Now, I need to flip this and put this in the chuck. So I need to grip this here. And I have a straight-sided serrated jaw, and I don't want to mark up and mar this wood surface. So what you can use is a couple of these high-tech clamping devices I get at the dollar store. Okay? I can take this, put that there. Take this one and I put it right behind it. And the elastic band is just enough cushion for those serrated jaws of your chuck, okay? Keep in mind, you also have to bear in mind the wall thickness and how much compression I can use on that wall thickness. Some tools around here. There we are. Put this bottom on. Now, how much is too much pressure? If you hear it crack, it's too much pressure. If it comes flying out of the lathe, that's not enough pressure. Okay. Bring up our tailstock support here. And I need to remove this material. And you can do that with a rough and gouge, skew, spindle gouge, a parting tool. I go too far, I want to shape the top of that top so it's curved. Now I can part through that part. There we are. I want to have a rough flat here, which is where my top is going to sit. Yeah. I also want a pilot hole for where my drill bit is going to enter. Yeah. So right there. Remove your tool rest. And do a very light sand of 240. There. And we have the top of our top. Need to grab another drill bit, which is my 1/4 inch drill bit. Line that up. Slow down the speed of my lathe between 200 and 300. And I drill in the depth of the drill bit head. So I'm only drilling in to the top of the head of that Forstner bit. Okay, so maybe 3/16 or so. If you're inclined, you can sand that, but you don't need to. And there we have the top portion of our top, where we have our shoulder, our ledge, hollowed end grain, 1/16 of an inch or 3/32 of an inch wall thickness. We use this so we don't have any teeth marks in the wood from our chuck jaws. And we have a centered hole for our handle. Okay. Now you can use the thicker bands or the thinner bands. I thought I had some thicker ones. I didn't, so I just doubled up the thinner ones side by side, and they worked well on all the others as well. Any questions I missed from the chat?
No questions, Kade.
All right, just need a sip of water here.
Okay, it's grabbing a drink of water. We're going to finish up this project tonight. We're going to run it a little bit longer in our demonstration, which is absolutely fine. That's what I'm here for. That's what you're here for. Couple of quick notes. On the 10th of August, we're going to have a complete 3-hour program on tips and tricks. And you're invited to come in, share, brag, whatever. And one thing that started this program off tonight with Kade's demonstration is he went very detailed on the safety requirements or suggestions that we should all listen to, pay attention to, be aware of. My Worldwide Woodturners is currently in the market for a new safety director. I'd like someone to take that post. It's voluntary, and we'd like to come to you about once every meeting and get an idea what your safety outlines or ideas would be. If you're interested, put your name in the chat, we'll get to you, or email me at worldwidewoodturners@gmail.com. That's worldwidewoodturners@gmail.com. We're back to Kade turning the finial.
Now we're doing the handle for our top. Now, a couple problems you may run into are you do not want the hole to be too deep, because when you spin it, it's not going to have enough room to flop over and fall over. You also do not want the stem to be too long, because then it won't latch as it comes and falls in. If you have this too long, you need a steeper hole, but then you also need a lighter top, because as this comes down longer, you have more leverage and top heaviness that this will actually fall right out of the cup. Okay, now these I dished out and I took the Forstner bit point out, but I find by doing so, the spinning top flops around a lot more, and then when it goes to fall down, it violently hits and falls out. Now those are a couple problems you might run into when making them, but also you do not want too heavy-handed of a handle, because the more weight we have out here, the more top heavy it is, and the more likely it is to just fly out and fall out of that cup. But if you have made these and the handle is too chunky or the stem is too long or vice versa, keep them, give them away, give them to grandkids or kids, or sell them at craft fairs, because they are still good spinning tops on their own, okay? Rather than just being in the tower. They will still spin. So I have 3 duds here, but they will go in my booth with all the other spinning tops I make and sell at the festivals, just to pay for my booth. Right? So they will still work if you have trouble with getting those precise measurements correct. All right, now the finial, or the stem. And that is why I make the stems quite tapered, and I keep the mass of the wood close to the head of the top. So it has a lower center of gravity, and it is less likely, it's not so top heavy to flop out of the piece altogether. It just falls nicely and sits just like that. Okay. All right. So this guy, we can rough with whatever you like. Sure, part of rough and gouge. There. And stuff above center. I start with the taper. I create a few V cuts. And create my taper of my handle here. I wonder why it's going so slow. I'm around standing speed. There, I'm back up to 1800. Create our entry point here, which is where this will be. Our connections, or our mortise for our tenon. Now I just do a rough estimate of that 1/4 inch. Okay. I refine that later. Like around this over. Okay. And also make a nice cove in here, just to get some separation between the two. Okay. This is a little high there. Come in like a half bead into a cove. Half bead into a cove. Blend the bottom. Now, to define my tenon, rather than try and worry about measurements and stop the lathe and start the lathe, what I use is when I make a whole bunch of finials or handles for these things, a lot of my holes are 1/4 inch. So I use a 1/4 inch wrench and I sharpened a bevel on either side. Now, when you use this, you do not want to contact both sharp edges because it will kick back at you and the piece will break. So when I am cutting, I am only contacting the bottom cutter, and as it gets closer to the 1/4 inch, the top end just falls into place, giving me my perfect tenon every time. Okay. And I have a couple different sizes of these for when I do different size finials. Here I'll show one with this overhead camera, and then I'll show one on my tailstock camera. Here I'm cutting with the bottom. The top just falls over into place. Okay. Here I am cutting with the bottom. The top just falls over into place just like so. Okay. Now I want to make sure that the corner where it connects to the is crisp and slightly undercut. But I have my perfect size tenon for that 1/4 inch hole. Okay, now I need to taper this end and finish it. I can grab my trusty skew again. And here. This came off. And come around that corner just to nicely round it and shape it. There we are. Grab my 240. Right hand in there. In there. All the sanding you need. And I take my thin kerf parting tool and I part through the base of this, catching it as it comes off. There we are. There we have our tapered handle to our spinning top. Moment of truth, does the tenon fit the mortise? And yes, it fits the mortise perfect every time. Okay. Now I would take my super glue again. Fill this hole slightly with my thick super glue on one edge and on the other edge. There we are. Bring that in. Oh, a little too much glue, so I'll take that out. Wipe it off. Don't glue your fingers together. Little too much glue. Just wipe it on your work pants. The wife will really appreciate it. You get a little bit of squeeze out there, that's okay. Take that, wipe that off. And take your 240 again and go across if you like. But most likely it will be hidden by the finial or the top portion of the, okay, so there. I would leave that for a few minutes. You can attach it with an elastic band clamp again, like I did with the base. And then I will grab the piece that we just turned and we will see if the spinning top falls properly within the tower. Now the crucial measurements will be the distance from the top to the tip where the undercut is, as well as the distance from the top of this shoulder to the bottom of that shoulder to make sure that when it falls, it lands just like so, okay? Now we'll try it out, moment of truth. There we have it.
Standing.
There you have it.
Great job, Kade.
Nice job, Kade.
Fantastic.
That
Good
looks
job,
great.
Kade.
Thanks,
Good
job.
everyone.
Great job, Kate.
Any questions for Kate on this project?
Yeah,
Great job, Kade.
Cade, when you were cutting the cap and you were
Yep.
cutting the inside, pulling your spindle, your detail spindle gouge, I think it was you were using. Are you going in with your tool flat? Are you going in with your handle down a little bit? I looked at your flute was completely closed or nearly closed, and then you were pulling it to the outside. But how was your tool? Was it flat or were you angled?
That's a really good question. So one thing I did was, it's just like when I used my bowl gouge, I was at a 45 degree in the direction I was cutting. So in this case, when I was going into the end grain, I was at a 45 in the direction I was cutting because I was entering and then coming back and across the piece just like so. You do not ever want to go in flat with that flute facing because that will bury itself in the end grain and it will be a very violent catch.
Mhm.
Okay, so you want to angle it. And even when I did the stem, I can actually throw on a small piece here and I can show you as I explain it, because I prepared a few of these. I was going to make a few more and have an extra one just in case something goes wrong, you know, better to be prepared. Throw that on there. And I'll show both cameras and the way I was cutting. Definitely do not want that flute flat. And my tool rest is at center, so my flute is, actually my tool rest was below center. I was cutting at center, but by having the angle and cutting downhill, it was cutting and scraping, giving you nice ribbons and shavings rather than dust you would get when you scrape, which gives that nice finish on the inside of the top because I did not sand that in any way. Right? So here, I'll show that quick. Just rough that round slightly quickly with a peeling cut of my skew. safety glasses here. Feeling cut. Now we have a round cylinder. Also do that with your roughing gouge. I need to face this surface quickly. So my tool rest is below center. So if I was cutting with this, like a bull gouge, we can see I'm cutting at center. What is that there?
When you were going from the center of the cup towards the wall, that's where I don't know, understand, or don't know how to hold the tool properly, and the orientation of the flute as I'm going towards the wall.
Okay, I just saw something in the chat. I wanted to read that to clarify, make sure something. Yeah, so I'm not using it as a scraper. So my tool rest is not above center and my handle is not angled down because I'm not using it like a scraper. If I was using it like a scraper, first of all, I would have to use a scraper and not a spindle gouge.
Right.
I would have the tool rest above center. So when I use my scraper, I'm cutting at center and my handle is in a trailing mode. Now that is possible at that acute of an angle. It doesn't have to be that acute, but that's a little exaggerated. But there would be at center in a trailing mode, scraping, okay? I'm not scraping with the spindle gouge, I'm cutting.
Right.
So in order to cut with the spindle gouge, my tool is below center and I am cutting rather than scraping. So I'm cutting at that center point, but you got to make sure you're cutting with the flute at a 45 and you're cutting downhill.
Okay,
You
fluted.
don't want to cut uphill. You'll get a lot more vibration. It's possible as long as you're bevel rubbing and cutting. But if you drop that and this drops and that is flat, it will be one hell of a violent catch. So
Okay.
you have to make sure you do not do that. So in order to cut downhill, I enter at a 45. You can see here I'm getting shavings. And then I pull it down and across.
Okay.
And then I close my flute as I approach that wall.
I got
Okay.
you.
So
That
in
answers my
fact,
question.
my tool handle is actually pointing slightly down and upwards because I am cutting and I am not scraping.
Okay.
Okay. It is possible to do it with your flute, your tool flat, just like so. Then I do need to close my flute as I approach that wall. But it is a little more resistance at that flat point and coming across. You get more resistance and more drag. So by having it slightly angled upwards, it's a much nicer ribbon and a much nicer cut. Close that flute. I was catching because I over rotated. Here I'm coming in 45, 75. Close my flute. Just right to there. I don't want to over rotate, which I did on those other occasions. Okay? So if you over rotate and you contact that top,
Right.
it's going to hit, you're going to bind that sharp edge in that corner and it's going to jump on you like it did.
Yeah.
So you want to have it 45, come across, close it right to there, but no more. And then come out the end just like that.
Thank you.
No problem.
That I've never done.
Any other questions, folks?
Yes, I have a question. Cade, this is Mark's play.
Hey,
Uh,
Mark.
Do you put a, when you're doing your undercut with your parting tool, do you put a slight angle on your parting tool so that it goes in and it parallels the stem when you're doing
No.
your undercut?
No, the angle on my parting tool is the exact same as when I use it for all my other jobs.
Okay,
So I am actually just going in on that slight angle. And by going in, there might be a slight taper on that shoulder.
correct. Yeah, I put a taper on mine when I'm doing an undercut, then it parallels the stem
Oh, okay.
when I'm doing the undercut. And that maintains the exact size of that little tenon. And the other thing I do when you made your little tenon and you put your glue in on that handle, on my tenons, whenever I do that and I'm going to glue, I always take and put little grooves up the tenon. And then when I push it in, the glue can expand into those little grooves and not squeeze out.
Oh, that's a good idea. And then it would be much more of a
Right.
solid fit because it would go within those grooves and then
Right. I
I'll
always
have to try that.
call them little glue expansion rings or whatever, you know.
Okay,
That's all
cool.
I have. You did a good demo.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks. Oh,
Great
one
demo,
little
Kate.
hiccup there, but still turned out and it all worked out. So
Yeah, good job.
Great demo.